Australia is already at the forefront of the fight back against big tech after it became the first country to ban social media for the under-16s. Now it's preparing legislation that would require major technology platforms to support local journalism or face a levy worth up to 2.25% of their Australian revenue. Well, from Sydney, I'm joined now by Adam Hancock, who's a journalist who reports for NPR, Al Jazeera and a regular voice here on Monocle Radio. Adam, good to have you back with us. Can you give us the detail of this proposal?
Yeah, it's been proposed by the Labour government here in Australia, and it's called the Media Bargaining Incentive. And the idea is that large digital platforms, which they've designated as Meta, Google and TikTok, would be taxed up to 2.25% of all their revenue in Australia unless they can strike deals to pay for local journalism. Now, media outlets here in Australia and in many countries have long complained that these big tech platforms and social media platforms are making a lot of money from using their content that they're not paying to produce. So under this legislation, any tax that is raised from that 2.25% would then be distributed out to local news organizations. But the companies involved, Meta, Google and TikTok, they can actually reduce or even eliminate that tax bill if they make deals with media organizations to pay for the use of their content. The communications minister in Australia said it's fair, and said that many Australians now use social media to access news, so it's only right that the companies are paying for it. But as you might imagine, those that are being targeted are not happy, in particular Meta, who have said that the law is poorly designed, very unfair, and will fail to deliver a sustainable news industry.
But there was a bargaining code introduced in 2021. What was that, and why is Australia back at the drawing board just 5 years later?
Yeah, they had a go at something similar, as you said, a few years ago. It was under Scott Morrison's government. It was called the News Media Bargaining Code this time, and it was putting pressure on the social media giants to strike deals directly with news publishers in Australia. It initially did have some success. Meta signed a lot of deals with big Australian news outlets. But then it was very much undermined when those contracts ran out 3 years later. Then in 2024, Meta said it won't be renewing the deals. They were worth millions of dollars. And they were actually saying, Facebook was basically saying that the users were not coming to their platforms for news and they're going to invest their money elsewhere. And that then reduced funding for many Australian news outlets, which have got used to receiving these fundings. And there was a lot of questions then about the effectiveness of the law, and basically platforms could use a loophole where they could walk away from the contracts, or they could just remove news content entirely from their platform. So I think now it's very much back to the drawing board. The government still likes the idea of this. It's just how can they implement it a bit more successfully moving forward.
And there are a few key companies that are actually excluded from this. Microsoft, Snapchat, OpenAI, they're all exempt. Why is that? And could it undermine the government's case?
Yeah, it's caught me by surprise, and it's certainly been quite a controversial element of this. And as you'd expect, the platforms that are being targeted are not happy about this at all. And the main reason really why the likes of Microsoft and OpenAI have been exempt from this is the government are saying that they're not primarily news distribution platforms or have the functions to distribute news, whereas they've looked at Meta, Google and TikTok, and they've said that they have a large revenue in Australia, large numbers of domestic users, and they rely heavily on sharing news from various sources. I think it's probably undermining the government's argument in many ways, because we do know that those other platforms that are exempt, they do have ways of distributing news. You can get news sources, obviously, from OpenAI, for example, and it makes the whole thing feel very targeted and raise questions around that. And as I said, the companies aren't happy. This is not lost on them that it's just 3 of them that are being targeted. Meta have put out a statement saying this is a discriminatory retroactive tax targeting a handful of foreign companies, while competitors offering comparable services face no equivalent obligation.
And Adam, briefly, if Australia succeeds, does this become a model for funding journalism in the digital age? Or is this just another battle between governments and big tech?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it could be something that could be used elsewhere. For example, in the United Kingdom, that there has been the same problems where media companies are saying that their information is being shared and they're not being paid for it. I think the main thing with that question is it's a very big if. The question really with this is how successful can the government be? They've already tried this once and they didn't get very far. They're very powerful, these organizations, as we've seen with the social media ban. For example, it's been very difficult for the government to police that and bring that in effectively. And will these organisations just find another loophole? So I think unless they can find a way of making a model that works and it is raising money and they are able to distribute it. And critics as well would also argue, in fairness, that the media organisations, they need something more sustainable than just receiving tax from big tech firms. They need new ways to generate income and become more self-sustainable.
Adam, thank you very much indeed. Adam Hancock, a journalist in Sydney who reports for NPR, Al Jazeera and others.